What if I told you that there's this tiny little thing inside each and every one of your cells that holds the secret to who you are? And not just who you are, but who you're gonna be, what you're gonna look like, even some of the health problems you might have. If I handed over a microscope, you wouldn't be able to see it. If I handed over a magnifying glass, you still wouldn't be able to see it. You would need an electron microscope to be able to see this thing, which is so small it's almost unbelievable. It's called deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. DNA is arguably the most powerful substance on Earth because it carries the instructions for shaping life. It's in everything that's alive right now watching this video, including you. It can tell you why you have brown eyes instead of blue, why you can taste bitter foods like Brussels sprouts, or why you're predisposed to certain diseases. You can think of it as a set of building blocks that determines all the traits that make up who you are. These traits can be physical, like eye color, height or hair texture, or they can be behavioral, like how you process certain foods or react to stress. These traits are known as phenotypes, and it's your DNA that holds the instruction manual for making them. But before we get too deep into the nitty-gritty of this double helix, let's talk about what DNA actually looks like. To start, here's a fun fact. The chemical instructions for life come packaged in roughly 6 feet of DNA inside each of your cells, which is about as tall as an 8-year-old. How is it possible for something that long to fit in such a tiny space? Well, that's thanks to our bodies coiling and folding this lengthy strand of DNA over and over again until it looks like a flat ribbon. Then it gets folded up even more tightly into a compact X-shaped bundle known as a chromosome. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, with one from each pair coming from mum and the other coming from dad. Together, these pairs contain all the genetic instructions needed to build a human being. Alright, let's dive a bit deeper. Let's take a closer look at that double helix. Like a ladder twisted into a spiral shape, DNA is made up of 2 long strands of nucleotides twisted around each other. Nucleotides are made up of 3 parts: a sugar molecule, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. The sugar and phosphate molecules form the backbone of DNA and are identical on both sides of the ladder. But the bases are different, and they're what makes DNA unique. There are 4 different bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, often remembered by the acronym GCT. The sequence of these bases along the DNA strand is what holds the genetic information that builds you. In other words, it's the order of these bases that holds the instruction manual for life. Okay, now let's take things one step further. Remember how we said that DNA holds the instructions for life? Well, that's true, but it doesn't do it alone. To get things done, DNA needs some help. Enter the factory that builds you. It's called the ribosome. Ribosomes read the instructions on DNA and use them to assemble amino acids into proteins. Proteins carry out many important functions in the body. They form structures like hair and nails. They serve as chemical messengers and they catalyze, meaning speed up, important chemical reactions. So, in a nutshell, DNA instructs ribosomes on how to build proteins, which then go on to do all sorts of important stuff in the body. Let's walk through exactly how this works. First, a gene on DNA serves as a template for assembling a messenger molecule called RNA. Think of this like taking the instruction manual out of the library and making a photocopy. Then the RNA copy travels out of the nucleus, which is where the DNA is kept, and finds a ribosome, which is like a construction crew waiting to build something cool. The ribosome reads the RNA's instructions and assembles the necessary amino acids in the correct order to make a protein. Now, that protein can go on to perform its special function in the body. But wait, rewind. We need to address something here. We said that DNA contains genes, but what actually is a gene? Well, a gene is simply a section of DNA that contains the instructions for making a protein. Here's an analogy. Think of the entire instruction manual for building a piece of furniture like a book. A gene is like a page in that book. Just like you would unread the whole book to find the instructions for building a single piece of furniture, your body doesn't use the entire DNA molecule to make any given protein. Instead, your body reads just the relevant section or gene on the DNA molecule, which acts as a template to make a protein. Different combinations of these proteins determine your traits. For example, your eye color is determined by multiple genes. One gene controls whether your eyes will be light or dark. If you inherit two light eye color alleles, or versions of a gene, you'll have light-colored eyes. But if you inherit two dark eye color alleles, you'll have dark-colored eyes. Another gene determines whether your iris will be blue, green, or brown. If you inherit the alleles for light eyes and a blue iris, you'll end up with beautiful blue eyes. Inherit different combinations of alleles and you get different traits. So remember how we talked about how DNA carries the instructions for your traits, which are the observable characteristics of an organism like eye color or behavior. Well, those traits can come in different varieties, which are known as alleles. For example, your genotype or genetic makeup could include an allele for brown eyes and an allele for blue eyes. However, you would only have one color of eyes. That's because certain alleles are dominant, while others are recessive. And the dominant allele masks the presence of the recessive one. In this case, brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes. So if you have one allele for brown eyes and one allele for blue eyes, your phenotype or physical trait would be brown eyes. Recessive alleles can only be expressed if there are two copies of them. So if you had two blue eye alleles, you would have blue eyes. So far, we've talked about how DNA carries the instructions for your traits, but where does that DNA come from? Well, it comes from your parents, specifically during reproduction. During sexual reproduction, each parent contributes one chromosome from each pair to their offspring. The offspring then inherits one chromosome from each parent for each pair. This shuffling of genetic material is important because it creates new combinations of alleles, which is why siblings can look different from each other and their parents. Now, let's take things one step farther. What if there's a mistake in the DNA sequence? Sometimes these mistakes happen naturally, but other times they can be caused by environmental factors like exposure to radiation or certain chemicals. These mistakes are called mutations, and they can have all sorts of effects on an organism. Some mutations are harmful, like the one that causes cystic fibrosis, a disease that affects the lungs and digestive system. Other mutations are beneficial, like the one that gives certain bacteria the ability to resist antibiotics. And some mutations are neutral, having no effect on an organism at all. When a mutation occurs in a gene that's involved in making a protein, it can change the structure or function of that protein. If the mutation occurs in a gene that controls hair color, it might result in a new shade of hair color. Or if it affects a gene involved in metabolism, it could lead to health problems. Ultimately, the effects of a mutation depend on where it occurs and what the mutation actually is. Okay, it's time for a quick review. DNA is like a giant instruction manual for life. It's coiled up in structures called chromosomes and found in the nucleus of cells. DNA is made up of building blocks called nucleotides, which are arranged in a specific order that determines your traits. These segments of DNA that hold the instructions for traits are called genes. DNA works with ribosomes to build proteins which carry out many important functions in the body. The study of DNA and heredity is called genetics, and it helps us understand how traits are transmitted from one generation to the next. And that's just the beginning. By studying DNA, we're able to learn more about ourselves and the world around us. We can identify disease-causing genes, develop new treatments for genetic disorders, and trace our ancestry back through time. We can even use DNA to solve crimes, identify the remains of loved ones, and determine the cause of certain diseases. The possibilities are endless. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the amazing world of DNA. Do you have any questions or comments? Leave them below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might be interested in learning more about genetics. Until next time, keep exploring the wonders of science and the secrets of life itself.